Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Tiny Porch Poetry Podcast. My name is Kristen Brown, and I'm going to be your host. And today we have guest Olivia Vining, who's an artist herself. She's written poetry, performed at the Lamp. I'm really excited to have her. She's also my housemate. Introduce yourself, Olivia.
Yo, what's up? I'm Olivia. Excited to be here. This is a cool series you got here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think so too. So today on Tiny Porch Poetry Podcast, I'm going to be having a conversation with Olivia about poetry and my personal poems and how I've grown as a writer and how my outlook on the world has really grown as well, and how that influences the language I use and the metaphors I use in my poetry. I also want to talk about my relationship with songwriting and how that bleeds into the deeper mechanics of rhyme and rhythm in a poem. So the first poem I'm going to read is actually the first poem I ever wrote. It's when I was 15 years old.
Like it.
And
it's a real relic here.
Yeah, it's a real relic here. You got that right. Let me just pull it up. So it was written in my first journal that I ever actively written in. I wrote in it every day. I had a lot of teenage angst. I was dealing with a lot of emotions. I know, right? I was dealing with a lot of emotions at the time, and I kind of turned to songwriting and poetry because I felt like no one was really there to talk to, and I used it as like an outlet to express myself. So this one's called Coffin. It's very dramatic, and here it goes. I scratch my fingers on the wall, curl my toes on the floor. I didn't know I'd feel so small, not able to open a window or door. I feel like a prisoner in my own made asylum. Walls were built higher and doors were slammed shut. My fears were the tyrant that left me to rot. Where is the hope and where is the cure? The yellow bird to save me from loneliness. I ask around, but they never sound sure. They say there is a path for love and forgiveness. But I've hiked every trail and scaled every mountain. Still, I always seem to fail to find this love-enriched fountain. I'm awake, but I'm dead inside. That's why I have a coffin fit to my size. So, Olivia, what are your snaps? What are your initial thoughts on that?
I think that's pretty well written for a 15-year-old. My lord. No, you have a very advanced style at that age, which I give props to, because I feel like at that age it's very hard to understand poetry, number one, to really get the syntax down. But I thought it was really good. What was there a certain point in your life or something that inspired this poem?
Yeah. So I actually wrote this at the height of my social anxiety. I developed a fear of large crowds, and I felt constantly claustrophobic. And this particular poem I felt really compelled to write because I was in this musty hotel room in Pennsylvania, staying over the night, because I went to, I believe it was my great uncle Rudy's funeral in Pennsylvania, and my mom and I were staying in this hotel room together, and there was fluorescent lighting. It was just a really uncomfortable room to be in. So that's I scratch my fingers on the wall, curl my toes on the floor, and I really felt like I was in a coffin, and I was grappling with the early ideas of death and trying to comprehend how people die. And I think at the age 15 or in your teenage years, you start to realize what not having an existence is like. And it's very dramatic language. I would never say coffin or like loneliness in a poem presently that I would write, just because it's too, I don't know, overdone, overdramatic. But yeah.
I feel like it's almost like a coming of age story.
Yeah.
But like not like one of the happier stories, but like realization of like what is actually in this adult life that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
Which is something that, like, everyone has to deal with sooner or later.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, coming to terms with what the world is around you, because I feel like you become hyper aware of your surroundings all of a sudden. Like, something clicks and you're like, wow, there is a huge world out here.
Yeah, and you're in this life.
Yeah, no, for sure. So in that same mode of self-realization, the next poem I'm going to read is about a memory. And it's actually the first poem I wrote in the advanced poetry class. And it has yet to be revised. So this is kind of like the basic structure of it. So I just want to hear some input and feedback. So it's untitled, and it goes like this. I see some people in your eyes, you born in topaz, you who grew with the ash tree, you in the day's wink, you the wide-eyed, you on the cusp of mobiles. I see your mother who held you in the mirror and said, the hazel flecks, the core of the iris, this is mine and yours, mine and yours. I will not know if you knew child amnesia would swallow the portrait like the esophagus swallows baby teeth. I will not know if you always knew you have your mother's eyes. So yeah, do you have any thoughts?
Well, this was more recently, right?
No, actually, so this is the first memory I have, and I wanted to write it down in this poetry class. So I believe it to be my first memory. Okay. And it's when I was probably 2 or 3, and I saw myself in the mirror, and my mom was holding me, and she said, oh, we have the same eyes, you have my eyes. And I chose to write it in the second person. So when I say you, the wide-eyed, you on the cusp of mobiles, I'm really speaking about the younger version of myself. And I chose the second person format just because I feel so detached from that person who was 2 or 3. I feel like I've changed so much since then that I would not be able to recognize myself in a mirror if I saw like a photo of myself or a reflection of myself. So this poem is representative of that. I definitely want to workshop it and grow the length of it. But no, it's not from the present. It's actually from many years ago. Yeah.
It's interesting that you take like one of your first memories and you can make it so like advanced with a writing style like that's taken so long for you to like, you know, find a voice as an adult, and then you like take something that was so early on, but like you use your adult voice and like all of the experience that you've had. So I think it like really puts another layer on such like a youth aspect.
Yeah.
Which is very like complicated but very beautifully put together.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So the next poem I'm going to read is a short acrostic poem, and every letter at the end of each line break is a letter in my sister's name. So yeah, this is the poem. We shared a room with matching mountain laurel printed bedspreads. Mama said our house was sinking, but you, in your calm lake-like demeanor, hid me beneath the sweet gale when the earth became heavy in the rain. So it's a very short poem.
Yeah, tell me how this relates to your sister. I want to know the story behind it.
Yeah, so like I said, my sister is like one of my, like, she is my favorite person in the world, and I know we've talked about that before. She is 3 years older than me. She is like a mother to me, really. And this poem in particular talks about when we used to share a bedroom in my old house. And when I say Mama said our house was sinking, that is both literal and metaphorical, because our house was built on an old swamp. So every time it rained, the whole backyard would flood and turn back into a marshland. It was kind of crazy. And we started realizing like cracks in the walls and like lopsidedness, and it would sink like half a centimeter every year. And after 7 years of living there, it had sunk like 3 inches. So and we had a maintenance guy come in. It was like this whole ordeal, and so it is very literal. Our house was sinking, but also it's metaphorical in the sense that this house that we lived in was like during the 2008 financial crisis, and kind of like the house market was plummeting, and my dad works in business, so it was like a really stressful time. People in his work were getting laid off left and right, so there was a lot of tension in the household, a lot of fighting about economics and finances, and in 2008 I was probably around like 10 or 11, right? So it's just even though it's so short, and that whole backstory probably doesn't get across to the reader, that is what was in my mind while writing this. Yeah.
May I ask if she's ever heard it?
My sister, yeah, I sent my sister this poem after I wrote it, and she cried.
Oh, that's
so
I would too.
We're really close, even though we're polar opposites. A lot of people don't even think we're related, but I think that is what makes our relationship all the more special.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this next poem I'm going to read is a collage poem I wrote in the class. And I actually have a physical copy here. And this collage poem is, it's basically, Olivia, I don't know if you know this, but a collage poem is like a, kind of like a hodgepodge type of deal where you just like paste together phrases and words, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it sort of does in its nonsensical nature. So it's called Categorical Desires. I stole Atropos' shears to fray bobbin thread left in great-grandma's singer, and to puncture my eardrum so the rural world's mumbled shuffle no longer sounded like geriatric slippers in a hospice. If our cochlear nerves resided underneath our fingernails, I wonder how caressing his broken rib or ripping hair follicles out from skin would sound. The ground, too, would be changed. If taste buds resided on the soles of our feet, I wonder how brisk and sour subway station linoleum tiles would taste when barefoot. I'm traveling in the New Haven Line train from Grand Central. At night, I scratch the window, hear my image, unsure if I am outside beside blurred trees and tracks or inside my body, tasting my brisk and sour city socks. But still from the sills, budding flowers spill sweet nectar, so perhaps the earth tastes like his inner thigh, or like the Macropolis case alchemy. Lachesis, is there a dearth of life's thread, sans your sister's shears? Is there no heuristic to measure string other than eyeballing the length and letting the spool unwind? Won't you rest, Sisyphus? There are decapitated squirrel heads rolling from rain runoff. You need not to push the rock. The earth's sugar will console you. So, what are your initial thoughts?
I liked it. So, like, it was just everybody else's lines and you kind of, like, put them together?
No, these are all my own lines.
Oh, okay. So, how was the conglomerate fit in?
Like, how do they all piece together?
Yeah.
Well, they don't really, but, the whole, like, inspiration of this was, like, categorical desires are things in life that grant us meaning, like, things we strive for. So I kind of took this as, like, an existential collage poem, and running with that, trying to find, like, the meaning of life and grappling with death and senses and perception is a bit overwhelming at times, kind of like you just have like a scatter brain type of stream of consciousness. So this is kind of a stream of consciousness I've had. So Atropos and Lachesis are two of the 3 sisters. And we've talked about this. And it's this one's actually inspired by Szymborska's poem. It's a interview with Atropos. So I wanted to take that idea of Atropos, but instead of just kind of mimicking Szymborska's work, I said I stole Atropos's shears, and in the sense, like, trying to defy the limits of fate and everything like that. So other parts of the poem include, like, mixing up sensory and sensory memory, because it's so bizarre to me that we smell only out of our, like, face and we hear only out of our head. Like, how crazy would it be if we, like, heard out of our belly button?
Yeah.
Like, I know, like evolution has structured us this way, you know, to protect us from predators, but still, like, what if something was different? We had to, like, hear on our back. Like, how crazy would that be if we had hearing, like, in our spinal cord? So I wanted to play around with that and bleeding into the realms of, like, surrealism. And also the lines, like, there are decapitated squirrel heads. I really just wanted to play with, like, realism and create visceral images and find a kind of like a refreshed version of language. And I'm so sick of poems that are just, like, pretty and beautiful. I'm so sick of writing poems like that, and I just want to write something that is nonsensical, it's gruesome, it doesn't make sense. So that's where the decapitated squirrel heads came in. I also have come across a lot of roadkill.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it was almost like you play on touch a lot and, like, making it a very visual poem, like, throughout the rest of your poems also, which is, I think, like, creates a really cool image whenever you, like, read poetry.
Thanks. Cool. So that's all the poetry we have. We're going to move into closing remarks. Olivia, do you have anything?
Yeah. One thing I noticed was just, like, the kind of style that you've acquired, and, like, underlying themes throughout, like, poetry. Even though they're all, like, so different, they all kind of play on that, like, familiar touch almost. Because, like, you had like, almost family aspects in all of them, or just, like, almost that earth touch. So something that was, like, a very loving, overlying, like, feeling, at least just, like, in, like, a very small part of it. So they all kind of gave off the same warmth, I felt, even though they're all very different.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you. Cool. So that's the end of our podcast. I'd like to thank Olivia for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Anytime.
And I'm gonna close this out with like an instrumental piece. So
yeah, look out for her new EP. It's coming soon.
Thanks, Olivia. Here we go.